Welcome back to the show. Thank you for taking me through this entire journey of disrupt yourself and building the A-Raters team. My next question to you, why this obsession with A team? What happens to the B team or the C team?
Well, here's what I would say to you.
Hmm.
I don't think there needs to be a B team.
Hmm.
I know you're probably familiar with Sandy Ogg's work and this idea of you've got your A++ players, and I think you do have some of those. But then the question becomes is you can't just have A++ players. You need to have the disruptors and the stabilizers. And I think that every single person, if they're at the right point on the learning curve, they're all going to be the A team. So part of it is making sure that you give them those opportunities to learn. But then the other part of it is that if they're not the A team, then it might be that they're on the wrong learning curve. And so how do you either find the right learning curve for them inside the organization, or maybe they need to be on a different learning curve in another organization?
That's not the place for you. So if you don't have an A team,
Right.
yeah.
Right, because I really, this goes back to something that you and I talked about earlier. I really believe that everybody's on a learning curve. We all want to learn. We all have ambition, actually, for something. So then the question is the ambition for the curve that's presented to them in this current work environment, or is the ambition for a curve somewhere else?
So where do you think the organizations and leaders struggle in building and creating an A team? What has been your findings in your work?
I think one of the biggest struggles that we have is once we've developed a person and they've become our go-to person, we start to believe that I built this team, I deserve a fiefdom. And so we don't want to let them go. There's a wonderful story of George Washington and Alexander Hamilton. I don't know if Hamilton's made its way over to India, but it's a play that's very popular, and he was the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, and maybe you're familiar with George Washington.
Yes.
Well, Alexander Hamilton was brilliant. He was at the top of his curve. He'd been George Washington's personal secretary for 4 years, and he wanted to jump to a new curve in the military. And George Washington said, sorry, no can do. I can't promote you over other generals. But the real problem is that Washington didn't want to let him go because he was his alter ego. Like, he knew exactly what he was doing. So what happens? There was a falling out. And unlike most situations, they finally were able to reconcile, and Washington was able to allow him to go graciously. So I do think that one of the biggest hindrances is that once we've invested in a person, we don't want them to go. And then when they want to go, we somehow feel betrayed and we make it about us. Whereas if we can just say to ourselves, okay, I hired this person. They're going to be on this curve for 3 or 4 years. They're not my one true love. They're on this learning curve. We're working together. We've got a game plan. If they work hard, I will let them move on. It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with them. It's just they've done the work. The learning machine's up. Time to jump to a new curve. And if we can separate ourselves out from that a little bit, I think that will make a big difference in terms of managers being willing to practice this human resources strategy.
Yeah, I always believe that sometimes you grow out of the organization, sometimes the organization grows out of you. And in both the situations, it's time to move on or let people go. Otherwise, they do more damage than
That's
actually
right.
growing.
That's right.
So, have you seen any difference between a startup and a well-established organization in terms of best practice for building the A team?
It applies in both situations. What I would say is in a large organization, there are a lot more opportunities, but it's harder to move. And in a smaller organization, there aren't as many opportunities, but it's easier to move. But this idea of everybody wanting to learn and be on a learning curve, it applies regardless of the size of your organization.
So you have authored many books. Which is that one book or books that has shaped your thought process, your path up to this place?
What's interesting is if you, at least for me anyway, if you look at a book, there's always some element of autobiography in a book. It's somehow mapping to who you are and what you're trying to learn and what you're trying to figure out at any given time. So if I think about Dare, Dream, Do that came out in 2012, What was the premise of that book? Well, I had just left Wall Street in 2005, 2006, and finally had a little bit of spare time. I wasn't working 80 hours a week, and our children were still fairly young. They were 8 and 4, respectively. And so I was spending a lot of time with the mothers of my children's friends. And I would say to them, what's your dream? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to do? Because I had this sense of like, I went out and did this thing that was really exciting, and now I want to know what you want to do. And frequently they would say to me things like, well, I don't really have a dream. If I did, I might be able to do it, but I don't know that I have a dream. But there was frequently this unspoken, I don't think it's my privilege to dream. And so that book was born of me saying to them, you have to have a dream. These are educated, talented, capable people. And they were just like, it's not my privilege. And it was also a little bit of an homage to these women who were teaching me how to figure out how to be a mother. Because I really hadn't focused that. I had children, but I hadn't focused a lot of attention on figuring out how to mother. So that was that book. Disrupt Yourself came of this path of, as I've talked about, discovering disruption and America Mobile and what did that look like, and it applies to people, and here's why I left Merrill Lynch. And so that's what Disrupt Yourself was about, and much more of a business book. The other book was more of, let's have a cup of hot chocolate. And then Build an A-Team, as I said to you, was, all right, I want to disrupt, but how do I create the ecosystem where that's possible? And if I will create that system, will it help me have a more innovative organization? So as Dan Pink said when I interviewed him on my podcast, when I asked him what his favorite book was, he said, you're asking me what my favorite child is. I can't do it. They're all my favorite children.
You can't be discriminating.
You can't.
Yeah. So in the pursuit of building a team, what's your central message to three audience? An aspirant who wants to be an A-rater, a leader who wants to build an A-team, and the organization who's pursuing the goal of creating an A-team.
Okay, so start with the person who's aspiring to be on an A-team. So the person who's aspiring to be on an A-team likely has a lot of great ideas. They're excited, they're eager, they want to contribute, they want to climb that learning curve. But sometimes they're so focused on their ideas and how brilliant they are, because we all do it. We all think our ideas are brilliant.
They're emotionally attached.
They get emotionally attached and they don't know how to get buy-in for those ideas. And so my advice to an aspirant who has great ideas and wants to get things done is to recognize that every time you have an idea, you're asking the person across the table from you to jump to a new learning curve. And it's not their learning curve right now, it's yours. So you've got to figure out a way to get buy-in, to pack a parachute, to be willing to share the idea with them, to co-create it. And so that would be the one thing I would say. Yesterday I was talking to this young woman, exact same situation. She doesn't know how to get buy-in. And if she can't get buy-in, she's not going to be able to be a part of that team because people won't listen to her, no matter how good her ideas are. Okay, so then the second person was the manager.
Yes.
So with the manager, what I would say is be willing that when your people get to the top of a learning curve, be willing to let them jump and not take it personally. And that's how you become a talent magnet. Because the talent magnet is a person who you've developed someone, you let them go, and then everybody wants to work for you. Because you know that if on your watch, if I work for you, you're going to develop me. And when I've gotten to the top of the curve, then you're going to be willing to let me jump to a new one. And so who doesn't want that? Like, we all want that.
Yeah.
So that's the second one. The third one is the organization.
Yeah.
From an organizational perspective, there was a study done out of Harvard by Boris Groysberg that looked at 450 small and medium-sized businesses and rating them on 20 different, self-rating on 20 different HR practices. The practice that had the absolute lowest rating of 20, lowest rating, not atypical last year, 450 companies, job rotations. So what can an organization do? They can make it possible for people to change jobs internally.
And move them to uncharted,
Right.
not so comfortable territories.
Right. To have them try new things, have them come up with areas that people need to go. I mean, 50% of the jobs that are going to exist in 15 years don't exist. So if someone comes to you and says, there's a problem I think needs to be solved and I'd like to try it, give them 3 months and let them see what they can figure out. And so I would look at how do I institutionalize not just job rotations in sort of the traditional sense, but the ability for people to move around. And you will discover that you've got people learning all the time, and therefore they're engaged all the time, therefore they're happy all the time, therefore they're more productive, and there's an ROI on that.
Yeah, and that's where I'm reminded of Gary's failure is a learning moment. In many places today, when I talk about, I said, I have 23 recorded failures. I have a resume of 23 failures. How many you have? And I see people struggling to find a failure. In Aussie Marine Corps, when they have to select people for the top ranks,
Yeah.
highest secretive missions, they say the dossier of failure. If somebody's never failed, they don't select.
I love that.
Because if a bigger mission comes like
Yeah.
Osama or something,
Yeah.
they're going to fail miserably.
I love that. I have some failures that I talk about pretty frequently, but I love the idea of I have 23 recorded failures,
Yes.
and what have I learned from that? I think that's a good assignment.
So my question to you, which is that one failure which set you up for a greater, bigger success?
Well, here's the one that's off the top of my head, and I think it's probably here because it's present right now. I speak a lot for a living, and a few years ago, I was giving a speech, and I was prepared, but they not only didn't like it, they hated it. I mean, they really hated it. Comment cards galore. Like, no one rated me as someone they liked. Like, I was the least liked speech of all of them. And I think that up until that time, I probably had people that liked the speeches well enough, but it wasn't enough to ever get me to do more than just tweak the speech. But when I got that kind of just feedback of just it was really bad, it forced me to really rethink my craft. Now, here's what's interesting. The material itself hasn't changed that much, but it was how I was presenting it. It was how I was framing it. And the big, big insight for me, I later learned, was that the way the speech was constructed, I was the hero. And if you're the hero, the person speaking, what does the audience do?
Focus is on you, not an audience.
Right. And no one wants to do that.
Yeah.
And so what I had to learn how to do was to reframe it so that the audience was the hero, and it was my job to be the guide. And that was a really important failure because it forced me to really change. And since then, when I speak, I'm always getting top marks. And I needed that to happen. It was painful. It hurt. It was bad.
You did the best thing in your life. That's why feedback is a gift. 15 years ago, I went to a MBA school to teach. And after the feedback, he said that you have an instructional style of thing. It doesn't work. Because I just transited from the military.
Yeah.
And it was hard, brutal. But I have kept that mail till date as a beacon to keep getting better and better.
Yeah.
You need to have such events, and these are also epiphany of a different kind.
Is that on your list of 23?
Yes.
Okay.
My last question, it's not a question, it's just if you could have a gigantic billboard with anything written on it, what would it read or say?
Oh. Can I have two choices?
Yes.
Okay. So one, I don't think it should be this, but I think this is important, is if it's scary and lonely, you're on the right path to disruption. But I think that the one I would choose, and this is not my quote, but it's from a fellow named Bob Proctor. And he says that I think so often people feel like money, we say that we think money is good, but people have a lot of like fraught feelings about money. And that money gives us the ability to do good beyond our physical presence.
Yes.
And I love that. I love that because I think that we focus on education, and education is important, and education is a wonderful resource, but we have different feelings about money. And if I could have a billboard that would allow people to believe that it is okay to have money, and you need it just like you need education, and it expands and extends your ability to do good. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing for people to believe?
It will be awesome.
So that would be my billboard.
Thank you for sharing that, and I really want to thank you for taking out time. I know your mail came at 10 o'clock, so it may not be possible, and I pushed you. Did I annoy you?
You did push me.
So I said, let me push, and if it has to happen, destiny and the providence is there.
You were not going to take no.
I just felt, how do I make it compelling? Because this is for an audience. This is not for me. And if I can get a bit of perspective from your life, which can become a teachable point of view, that's where I earn my livelihood or choice of impact in others' life. Thank you very much for taking our time.
You.
It's
I
been
appreciate
fun
it. Yeah.
and joy speaking to you.
Thank you.